So yeah, if you wanted to just say, if you just wanted to say Harlem High School in Illinois, that's fine too. Either way works.
All right, Coach, here we go. Tonight, tonight and today, this morning in Illinois, where Coach Mike Winters is, we're interviewing a high school coach. High school coach Mike Winters from Machesney Park, Harlem High School over in Illinois. And he he's just written a book, which is the journey lessons from the hardwood. Right, Coach? Lessons.
That's it. You got it. Vince, Brian, it's good to be with you guys.
All right, Coach. And you've been a head coach for 18 years, assistant for 7 years. So you've been at it for the last 25.
Yeah, that's correct. I spent 7 years as an assistant at high school here in the States. Generally we have three levels. We have a freshman level, we have a JV level, and we have a varsity level. So been an assistant at all three levels at some point in those 7 years. And then very fortunate to get a head coaching job when I was 26 years old. So yeah, it's been a while, but at the same time, it's gone really fast. And, when you're doing what you love to do and coach kids, it tends to fly by. So.
All right, Coach, you've won nearly 70% of the games you've coached, and it's impressive. Yeah, I'm curious when I read your bio, when I went through your website, the question that popped into my mind is, and I'm pretty sure you've been, is have you received offers to coach in the next level, D1, D2?
Yeah, I've had a couple opportunities to make the jump when, usually it happens, you meet college coaches in the recruiting process, when you have a player that's a really good player and you start to meet coaches through the recruiting process, and a couple opportunities, but for me, the timing just wasn't right. I think, that jump to the next level is, we work a lot as high school coaches. That jump to the next level is it's even more hours, and then you're on the road a lot, so you're away from your family. So my family right now, my son is 16, so he'll actually be playing for me this upcoming season at the varsity level, and then my daughter is 13. So, I don't want to miss any of their things. So, the timing's got to be right for that. When they're done with high school, would I consider it again? Yeah, I would. But just the opportunities I had, just bad timing. If we had a young family, and that was my number one priority at that time.
So would it be safe to say you would probably consider it when your kids are in college already?
Yeah, I think so. I think we would definitely revisit that. I think, a lot depends on, where my wife is at in her career and the ability to, we're both teachers. So, if we had to make a move for something like that, that would be, a family decision, and it'd have to be something where she could settle in and get something that works for her as well.
All right, before I turn you over to Brian, Coach, when you wrote this book, what was your initial thought process?
What I love about the game is we share the game, right? We share ideas, we steal ideas, we borrow ideas from each other, and the game gets better as a result of that. I think, the great thing about social media is you can find so many resources as a coach these days, and I was helped by a lot of people when I was younger. So in November of 2020, when we were supposed to start our season, we didn't start our season. We were kind of on hold, and we didn't end up playing until February. We played a really short season in February and March because of COVID. And so I'm sitting there with all of a sudden this, I don't know if you call it free time, but time that I expected to be really busy. And it's like, why not do something you love to do anyways, which is help other coaches out. So, I think the idea behind the book was really to give something for everybody. For a young coach who may be really inexperienced, I think you've got everything in there, from how to build your coaching philosophy to examples of the emotions that come along with coaching, and just the relationships that you're able to build throughout it. And I think, a young coach, and I even said this in the book, as a young coach, I pictured our team reunions, where we're always talking about wins and, all these great accomplishments. And it's not what it's about. When you get together with a team 10 years after you coached them, they're talking about, things that made them laugh. And just so that's where the title of the book comes from, the journey. It's really just about the day-to-day stuff. And that's ultimately what the kids remember. So I think as a young coach, I think we all focus on wins and losses. We focus on results probably too much as a young coach. And a lot of what I'm trying to convey in this book is simply, step back and enjoy every step of it. Don't forget to enjoy the relationships. Don't forget to maintain those relationships after those kids move on. And, I think there's, when I realized that, again, I was 26 when I started, I was really young, so I didn't always get that part. And, if there's one thing I wish I could go back and do, it's really value those relationships right from the very first year and maintain those relationships, because we have a really, really special opportunity as coaches to, we get into these kids' lives. We get to see them get married. We get to see them have their first kid. We get all these great experiences to kind of enjoy with them. So it truly is a blessing to be able to do what we do.
All right, Brian.
Yes, thanks, Vince. Again, good evening, Coach from here, and good morning over there.
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
I'm just curious, where did this love for basketball start? Were you a player during your younger days?
Oh man, that's a great question. So my dad was a baseball coach when I was younger. He coached, like 13, 14-year-old, just a little past Little League. For us, it's called Pony League in our area. And there's several different ways to play, but he also just loves sports in general. So I remember being at my first high school basketball game, probably when I was 3 or 4 years old. And ironically, it was at Harlem High School where I'm now coaching. And I didn't start my coaching journey there. This is my fifth stop. And that's got a long story in and of itself, because as teachers, we bounce around a little bit. My wife, like I said, is also a teacher. So we've looked around just to make sure we both have jobs all the time. And budget cuts happen in districts and things where you move and you didn't intend to move. But yeah, I was in a high school gym at age 3 or 4 with my dad, and we went to a ton of high school basketball games and just really fell in love with it. One of the things I love about high school basketball is we still don't have a shot clock here in the United States. So in our high school level, I know a lot of countries are adding that. Even some states in the United States are starting to add it. But without the shot clock, you can kind of equalize things. You might have a lot more talent than I have, but I can play a style that will give my kids a chance to win on that night. I think that's what's so great about the game. Is I think we get excited about upsets in the NBA, or if here in the States, the NCAA tournament is huge, and you get a 15 seed that beats a 2 seed, everybody's just going nuts over it. Well, I mean, that happens in basketball almost every weekend at the high school level. So it's a unique game in that sense. I am a proponent of the shot clock. I'm looking forward to getting it in high school basketball because I think it's just time. But so I just kind of fell in love with everything about it at a very young age. And honestly, it's, I'm 47 now. So it's been a part of my life a big part of my life every single year for about 44 years now.
Oh, okay. It's quite a story, Coach. All
yeah.
Right. You've been coaching for quite some time now. I'm just wondering, did you have any problems in the early years handling players? Because we all know as coaches, you have to deal with some erring kids, egos, and everything. You have those share of the difficulties.
Well, one of the things I wrote about in the book, when you talk about a player that has an ego or maybe a bad attitude or something, I always said when, and I'll use like a middle school, like we have a middle school feeder program, right? 7th and 8th graders. And I always say when somebody says, oh, you don't want so-and-so, he's got a bad attitude, I always kind of smile. I want to go watch him play, because sometimes at a young age, what gets labeled as a bad attitude is just a kid that really, really cares. He's passionate about it. He wants to win, but he's 13, he's 14. He doesn't know how to express that or how to turn that into a positive. So, I think great players have egos, and that comes along with coaching. You want those guys, and you want to take that ego and instead of getting them to buy into what their stat line is, how many points and how many rebounds they're getting every night, you try to get them to pour into how many wins they're getting and just really understanding the process. It's really not about the result. It's about just day-to-day activities. What are you doing today to make your team better? I think when you get those players that have those egos to buy into that, that's when you really have something. And so you have to understand that kind of comes along with the territory. You're going to get players that the ones that want to be really, really good are going to have a little chip on their shoulder, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And in my case, coaching high school kids, you have to teach them how to use that, because they don't know. Sometimes they haven't seen it modeled for them before, and you're the first one, so you have the opportunity to have a great impact as far as that goes. You're going to run into some parent issues too, I think, as a young coach. That's I think there's always like you always have what the kid wants to get out of it, and what the parent wants to get out of it. And in a lot of cases, they don't line up. And so that's something that you kind of have to point out to a parent once in a while. Like, listen, I talked to Johnny, and he's just, he's excited to be a part of the team. He understands his role. He's bought into his role. Seems like you as the parent have a different mindset of where this is going to go. And it's, you got to remember, and I think you got to remind parents, it's not your game. It's the kid's game. It's their opportunity. You had your opportunity. And that's tough to do. And I think ultimately, no matter how difficult a parent is, you never want to hold that against the kid, because the kid is probably just as embarrassed about that parent screaming from the stands. And it's not the kid's fault. So I think throughout the years, I've had a couple tough situations, but I think the kids always appreciate that I never really addressed it directly with them, and understood that it's not on them. There's always so much they can control there.
Do you feel that the current, well, I mean, you've been around for quite some time. You know that some kids are influenced by the NBA players right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've seen a lot of changes. I mean, I'm not gonna name any names, but let's face it, they do influence. But sometimes, if you compare the players from now to before, there's a bit of a difference. Have you had that experience as well?
I think there's a lot of, I think basketball has grown globally, right? I mean, obviously we're talking basketball. You're in the Philippines and I'm in the States here, and we're talking about that, which I think is awesome. It's a cool thing. And kids are exposed to a lot more. When I was a kid, you couldn't get on YouTube and sit there and just watch Kyrie Irving's crossover moves for 20 minutes and then try to mimic it. Like, I could have my phone sitting right there and just try to, we didn't have these opportunities. So there's a lot of positives in that. I see a lot of kids trying to do very high level footwork into a jump shot, a step back or a step to side jump shot, and trying to get the kids to understand at 16 that, the guys who you see doing that at a high level in the NBA are also incredibly strong and athletic. And we're just not there yet. We're just not ready for that yet. And, even if I saw a great graphic a couple months ago, even it showed they broke down statistics on like step back threes. Right. And that's the rage right now. That's what everybody loves doing, because they see it. And when it goes in, it looks great. But how often does it go in? Even at a very high level, I think the number one shooter on a step back three was still under 40% in the NBA. And I'm just kind of like, fellas, we're just not ready to do that. And I also try to parallel to this. Steph Curry is probably the greatest shooter in the world. I don't know if many people would argue that. And we talk about just some basic pivot square up type footwork, just if you're right handed, it's going to be left, right, and go. And we talk about the fact that, Steph Curry would probably make that 98 out of 100 times, maybe 99 out of 100 times, from mid range and in that area. And, we try to remind our kids, like, these guys are perfect at these things before they move on to the high level footwork that you're seeing in the NBA on a night in, night out basis.
Thank you, Coach. Vince, back to you.
Coach, have you had young players, kids who you've had to hold back a bit because they're working so hard at their game and they're just bordering on obsessive in doing so well and doing so well for you and for the school and the community?
Yeah, I think that another area of the game has changed is the kids can play year round. When I was a kid growing up, we would play football in the fall, we would play basketball in the winter, and we played baseball in the spring and summer. And there was just always that cycle. And then, other, soccer, things like that. You played several sports, but you didn't have the opportunity to play that sport outside of that season. So I even wrote, one of the things I wrote about in the book is, in today's age, you have to kind of manage minutes. You see guys get that coach's night off in the NBA, right? It's more of a rest thing. We do that in practice once in a while. Our season generally goes November through early March. It's a pretty long season for a high school level. And, there's times in January, February, we look at a senior who maybe has played 100 plus games that year because he plays for, his AAU or his travel team, and he's playing for us as well. And they're just beat up, they're physically, their knees are hurting, their body's just hurting. And sometimes I think as a coach, you have to tell kids to take some time off, get away from it. We really encourage multi-sport athletes. We encourage our guys to go play another sport and just get away from it a while. And that other sport allows them to develop physically, you know, but they use their ligaments and their muscles in a different movements, and it takes off some of that wear and tear. I think so many guys, you see a lot of ACL injuries, obviously this day, a lot of knee injuries, and I think, you know, most of the time that's an overusage type injury where that ligament just wears away over time. And so now you go run track or you go do something different, and you just use those muscles and ligaments in a different way, and actually maybe strengthens them versus wearing them down. So that's a conversation we have with our kids. You know, we do encourage them in an age of, I think we're in an age of specialization. Like Vince, you're a really good player. You got to stop playing baseball or whatever it is, and you got to really focus on basketball. I think we tell that to kids way too young. That's definitely not my mindset. I had a kid come the other day, and you know, we're getting ready to go in the weight room after school. We just started school back up here in Illinois this week, and the kid just transferred into school, and he decided he wanted to go play football. And he looked kind of nervous when he was coming to talk to me. I'm like, I said, hey, go play football. I said, you only get to be in high school once. You know, if you think that's something you want to do, absolutely go do it, and we'll figure it out. So I think sports specialization is a little bit of an issue. But for that kid that just absolutely loves it, yeah, I think you want to encourage that. If he really knows what he wants to do, you want to encourage that, but you really got to manage the injury and make sure they're taking care of their bodies and all that stuff.
Before school opened up in Illinois, Coach, at the start of the pandemic, have you had time at the start of the pandemic until when school started opening up to help your learning as a teacher and as a student of the game? Maybe look at how high school basketball is conducted in other countries, how our high school basketball coaches in other countries. Have you done opportunities like that? Have you had the opportunity to do those things?
So as a coach, I love running like quick hitters, like set plays. Quick hitters for us, the term is it's like a horn set ball screen action, just a few actions that are kind of orchestrated early in the offense. And at the high school level, you know, there's a lot of coaches that run strictly motion offense. I don't like to start with motion because I think kids struggle with early movement. I think if I can script that early movement and let it flow into a motion type offense, that's just what I like to do. Awesome thing about our game is you can do it totally different and still be really successful as well. But so yeah, I study a lot of set plays and things. I watch a lot of international stuff, and as I alluded to earlier, there's so many opportunities on the internet now to find this stuff. There's so much stuff that, like what we're doing, where you can tune into listen to a podcast. You know, I can be out working in my yard and listen to a podcast this afternoon if I want to, and hear some other coaches, really successful coaches' philosophy and how they do things. I think, you know, my mindset when I was younger was just find a couple things. Back then we would go to coaches' clinics, right? We would sit in gyms. And I used to like to go to the Nike championship clinics, and they would bring in high level college coaches, Mike Krzyzewski, Dean Smith back in the day, Rick Pitino, Jim Boeheim at Syracuse. And you just sit there all day and listen to these guys talk basketball, and you just try to pick things up wherever. Again, I think young coaches, like young players, they have so many more opportunities to do that, where they could stumble across this podcast where you and I are talking, or this live, this Facebook Live, or whatever it is. And so I've actually, what you're doing, we've actually run some, we call them just virtual clinics, where we would get some coaches lined up. Sometimes it was just a roundtable where we were on a Zoom like you and I are, and we'd have 15 coaches, and we'd list a couple topics for the night. Everybody just kind of go around and talk about it. And it was really cool just you hear different terminology, you know, you find like, oh man, I really like that. Give you an example. I stumbled across a coach who had an app on his phone, and it was just called the decibel meter app. And all it was it just measures sound, right? It just how loud the gym is. And we all as coaches want a noisy gym. We want our players engaged. We want them talking. Like, that's a great idea. So I've got that app on my phone now. And every once in a while it's kind of quiet. I'll go show the kids kind of know it. I'll go show it to them, and they'll see where we're at on a decibel level thing. And they're like, all right, we got you, coach. And they'll step it up. And so the guys on the sideline we want them coaching all the time. You know, we want them engaged in coaching. So it's just one example of things that you can find and borrow and just work into your system some way, somehow.
Do you have a go-to offensive set, Coach, where you're down by, let's say, 1 point, 2 points with 2-3 seconds left?
Oh, I got a bunch of them. I've got a bunch of them. I'll tell you one thing that we do a lot of. I think when you're talking about coaching younger kids, there needs to be a comfort level. So if let's say we're behind 6-8 points in the fourth quarter, our comfort level set, the set that we just go to every time down the floor, is a really simple. We run our two best shooters are in the corners. We simply run our shooter in the right corner off a single screen on the first block and off a double screen on the second block. And then our second best shooter, or sometimes we switch around, our best shooter is one of those two screeners on that second set of screens. He will then take off a single screen back the other direction. So it's kind of a misdirection play. We also have that finishes with a high-low, with a big man flashing on the top of the key and catching, another big man stepping in right on that rim line, just posting up right in front of the rim. That's what we run at the end of every quarter in our program. So we play quarters. We play 4 quarters. They're 8 minutes long. So our goal is to always have the ball in that last 45 seconds and hold the ball for the last shot and just be in control of that. Make sure our opponents don't get the ball back. So that's what we do. We run a little bit of a spread floor delay game into that set at the end of every quarter. So we work on it a lot. And then, when we fall behind, it's like, all right, let's go to something our kids are really comfortable with that we run a lot. So we do that. You're more specific to your question. If we're down 1, I'm really different night to night, just depending on matchups, who's got the hot hand, but what our opponent, I think, kind of dictates that. What matchup do we go to? Like, this is a really good matchup for us tonight. So if we can exploit this matchup or, something like that, I try to be flexible on that. I think my job is to give our kids the best chance to win. And I think we have to analyze those matchups night in and night out.
Now, reading the early parts of your book, Coach, you mentioned about criticism that you've received and from armchair experts who are watching in the stands, from so-called basketball analysts. Now, with the advent of social media, your kids may receive also criticism because they didn't make the shot, they didn't knock it down, they flopped or faked the foul or whatever. What do you tell your kids? How do you teach them to deal with all this stuff? Especially, let's say they go on to the next level. There's more exposure to media.
Yeah, that's the negative. I think there's a lot of positives with social media, and I think that's the negative. And I think one of the things that I talked about in the book was that these kids are being evaluated at a very young age. That's always happened. Like, college coaches were always out watching these young kids, and they always wrote, there was always scouts who wrote these reports on kids and they sold them to colleges, right? But that was the extent of it. You and I didn't know what they were writing about these 13, 14, 15-year-old kids sometimes. Now, the same people that write those reports put it on social media. So then you read about a kid, and this kid's supposed to be something really special, and you go watch him play, and he has a bad day. He's 13, 14, 15 years old, right? They're going to have bad days. And maybe he got a little frustrated and now you're coming back, you see people coming back in social media and say, oh, that kid's got a terrible attitude, he's never going to make it. And we just don't give these kids room to grow. Like you have to. And I think sometimes with basketball, especially, these kids are so big and strong, you forget how old they are. I've had a kid who was, a freshman playing for him, just a big, strong kid and super athletic. And every once in a while he'll say something to you and you just kind of smile. You're reminded that, he's just a kid. Like, physically he doesn't look like a kid, but he is a kid. And I think they've lost the opportunity to grow a little bit. And that's, I think what I like is the discussion about mental health now, because I think what you're talking about, what you're referring to, I think a lot of kids experience. They're going to read something negative about themselves on social media related to them as a player. And how do we deal with that? I think for a long time, you just had to kind of bottle that up inside. I think, seeing like Simone Biles at the Olympic talk about it, and seeing Naomi Osaka talking about it. And I think that's an important conversation. I think it's good for our players at that age to see professional athletes talk about these things and know that it's okay to talk about these things. I think for too long, there was this negative, just connotation to mental health and like, oh, there's something wrong with that person. No, first of all, I think we all have a little something, mental health wise. And so I love that those conversations have come to the front. I love that. I think we as coaches are doing a better job of telling our players, hey, it's okay to not always be okay. It's okay to struggle when you see this or you see that. and just try to give them an outlet and an opportunity to talk about those things when they need to talk about it.
In the 25 years that you've been in the coaching profession, have you done any recruiting at the high school level? Because there's also recruiting in the high school level, right?
Well, there's not supposed to be in Illinois. There's not supposed to be any recruiting going on.
Okay.
There's always that, with a public school. I teach in a public school, so we have our boundaries set. So you either live in our district or you don't. If you move into a district, you're not supposed to move because of athletics. Now, does it happen? Yeah, it happens. A kid definitely moves in because this school is a better basketball program, or this school is a better soccer program, or something like that. Private schools in Illinois have a 30-mile radius. So if the school is here, you got 30 miles all the way around the outside that they can draw from. So, does recruiting happen? Yeah, it happens. Who's doing it? Yeah, it's not supposed to be the coaches. A lot of times it's the parents. And now with travel, AAU being really popular, these kids from other schools all play together. So now they want to play together on their school team. So you'll see someone move to try and, I want to play with so-and-so. And it's just like the NBA, right? They're trying to create these super teams, and
Yes.
it's just a part of it, even at the high school level. So it's you're not supposed to be recruiting at this level. Actually, you can, in Illinois, you can get sanctioned if you are caught doing so. I think a lot of people would say, this private school or that private school have gotten away with it for a long time.
And you've dealt with a lot of parents in the 25 years you've been coaching, and since you've started, has the behavior of parents, you're being stage parents, or some parents, they trust you enough to just let you take care of their kids, has their behavior evolved through the years, or are parents still the typical parents who, why isn't my kid getting any playing time?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved, and I don't know if it's evolved in a good way. I think that, I think the fact that, we've mentioned travel ball a lot. These kids are playing year round. I think the fact that parents have more invested now than they did 20, 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, to play for your school team, you probably didn't even pay a fee where we live. You may have paid a small athletic fee, under $100 probably. And you played your 25 games in season, your season was over and you moved on. Nowadays, these kids are playing year round. Some of these parents are paying thousands of dollars just to play. That's not even counting the hotel rooms and everything as they travel and follow their son or daughter around. And I think the parents feel like they're more entitled to be more involved. And I think parent involvement has almost gotten, in some cases, there's too much involvement. And I'm in a situation where I coach my son now. He'll be a junior at our high school, 11th grade at our high school. So, I'm involved in a little different way as his coach. But I think sometimes I just say there's too many voices in youth sports. You got dad yelling from the stands. You got somebody else yelling. You got 3-4 coaches standing up yelling. And I coached my daughter's softball team as well. They were 12 last year. And there are times where I would sit there in the dugout, games being played, and I'd see a young lady up to bat and she'd swing and miss. And I would hear 4 different criticisms of that swing. The girl steps out of the batter's box and she's like looking around like, man, how bad am I that I did 4 things wrong in that one swing? And so, yeah, there can be too many voices. I think parents ultimately, as a parent, I know I want what's best for my kid. And I don't think that they mean to be, an issue or a problem. But I think sometimes the best thing as a parent you can do is just sit down and let your kid have their journey, let them figure it out. If they want to talk to you about it after the game, that's up to them. But I think sometimes every car ride home after a game becomes negative with certain parents, and it really takes away from it for the kid, unfortunately.
All right, Brian.
Right, Coach, I'm gonna pick up on that. I mean, I'm just curious. Has there ever been any player coming from your end, a product of your coaching, making it to the NCAA or the NBA?
So I've got a professional baseball player right now that I used to coach on the basketball court. I've got a professional football player for the Green Bay Packers that I used to coach on the basketball court. I have had about think 9 or 10 players that have played at the Division I level, NCAA, schools like Minnesota, Kansas State, some smaller schools like University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, University of Illinois, Chicago, Evansville, what else? Wisconsin, Green Bay, but the Division I level, Florida A&M. So yeah, I mean, I've been pretty fortunate. I've had some nice size in my career. I've had a 7-footer that's played D1, a 6'10" kid that's played D1, and some really nice guards that have gone and played. So it's a cool experience. I was just at a wedding last weekend of one of my former players, and he had gone on. He played at Florida A&M University. It's an HBCU, historically black college, and they played at the University of Wisconsin one night. Now Wisconsin's a Big Ten. It's big time Division I, and they were just fortunate enough to get an early season game at Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, Madison for us is about an hour drive. So I got to go up there and you know, it was his junior year. He was starting. He was in a starting lineup. So we're in the Kohl Center in Wisconsin. There's 17,000 people there, and he gets introduced in the starting lineup. And I've just got like, you know, tears in my eyes, goosebumps. You know, just this is really cool. You know, he had an awful game. His coach ended up benching him mid-second half. I had a recruit that Wisconsin was looking at. So I'd taken a recruit to the game as well. And we got to go into Wisconsin's locker room after the game, listen to their post-game speech. And after that wrapped up, I asked Bo Ryan, who was the coach of Wisconsin, I said, Coach, I said, can somebody show me how to get to the visitors locker room? And he's like, why do you want to go there? And I told him, I said, I got a former player playing, you know, LC Robinson. He's like, oh, he goes, man, he's a great player. He said, we game planned for him. He was the guy we had to chase off that 3-point line and shut down tonight. And I'm like, that's really cool. You know, like, thanks for telling me that, Coach. And he had a manager walk me over there, and LC's standing there, and he comes up to me, he gives me a hug, and he's crying. He's like, Coach, I'm sorry. He goes, you drove all this way, and I was terrible tonight. And I'm like, LC, are you kidding me? I'm like, I said, I got to see you introduce a starting lineup in the Kohl Center in front of 17,000 people tonight. I said, I loved every second of tonight. I said, it may not have been what you wanted as a player tonight. I said, but I loved every second. I said, don't be sorry to me for anything. You know, so yeah, you have those opportunities where if you do it long enough, you're going to be lucky enough to coach some of those guys. And it's pretty cool. And then I got to go to his wedding last weekend, which was pretty awesome too. So.
Wow, that was cool. Yeah, I know the feeling. I mean, when you see your player, I mean, reaching it, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the young man that's pitching for the Kansas City Royals last few years, and I've got another one that's pitching in the Boston Red Sox organization. So even if it's not as a basketball player, just to see them go on and do great things. But you know, I'll say this: it's also really cool just to see him being a great dad. You know, I think that's probably, and that's one of the things I mentioned in the book as well. Like, as coaches, we have to set them up for what they're really going to do, what their most important role is going to be. That's being a good father, a good husband, you know, maybe a great boss or supervisor at their job, and just leaders in general.
Okay, Coach, I'm going to ask you something very important here. It's something that LaMelo Ball kind of caused quite a stir in the past days. It's about, well, not really jumping immediately from high school to being paid.
Yeah.
How do you, have you had that experience? I mean, players coming from your program from high school, making the jump immediately.
I haven't. I coached against Sean Livingston. Sean Livingston graduated from high school. He was an Illinois kid, Peoria, in 2004, and he was signed to go to Duke. And Sean ended up being the number 4 overall pick in the NBA. And you know, a lot of people know Sean as kind of this NBA journeyman, right? I think he played for 9 teams, and Sean was being compared to Magic Johnson. He was a 6'7" point guard, the longest arms I've ever seen, incredibly talented. And he just had a brutal knee injury early in his NBA career. So I don't think anybody really saw, even in the NBA, I don't think people saw the Sean Livingston that we saw playing high school basketball when he was 16, 17, 18 years old. The kid was phenomenal and just a great kid too. I think, you know, I haven't had that opportunity to coach somebody who was that good to have that opportunity. I love college basketball. So your question makes me cringe right away, because I want those guys to, even if they go play college for 1 year, I want them to go play college basketball. That's kind of my thing. I like college basketball more than the NBA. I think because it's closer to what we do as high school basketball coaches, you know, the way the game is played, all those things. So I don't want to see that happen. I know there's been attempts to, you know, pay these kids big money. There's been leagues trying to pop up that are like transitional leagues. Obviously the NBA has the G League, you know, will that become will they split to 2 levels possibly where these high school kids could go? I think ultimately what it comes back to is the people who are going to run these leagues need to know they're going to make money. It's tough to pay a kid out of a high school $1 million or $2 million and have him go play in front of a handful of fans who would rather be at an NBA game or a college game or something like that. So I don't know if it'll ever get off the ground. I'm a little fearful if it does, because I just think it'll ruin the game that I love. But it's interesting. I know there's everybody's looking for a way to be innovative and make their mark. And the talk is interesting. I don't know, is there enough high school talent that's ready to play at that level? I don't know if there is. I think the kid like Sean Livingston he's not the norm, right? And that's what made him such a phenom at that age. He was different. And so I think the jump from high school to the NBA has happened. Kobe did it, Moses Malone did it way back in the day. And there's been guys that have done it, but a lot of them haven't done it very successfully. That's what you got to remember. They needed that growth that the college game could probably provide for them. They didn't get it. And that might be a reason why they didn't make it. So there's a lot to consider there.
But do you preach the value of education for finishing a degree to your players at that level?
So I had, the young man who's playing for the Kansas City Royals right now, he was signed to go pitch at North Carolina State University, and he got drafted and they threw a bunch of money at him. And it's like, that's enough money to pay for school like 5 times over. So, there used to be a time where players weren't paid this ridiculous amount like they are today. Mm-hmm. It's hard to make that argument today with the type of money they're willing to throw at you, because that money will easily pay. If you get injured, I think the thing you really have to focus the conversation on is if this is something you really want to do and they're really willing to pay you that much, you just need to be really smart with that money. Like, don't go blow it all, invest it, keep it, because, you're like Sean Livingston, a terrible knee injury. You can't control those things. So you want to make sure that you leverage that opportunity to be able to get you somewhere else if you need to. And so I think the conversation has changed quite a bit in the last 20 years or so, just because of the amount of money these guys can make. It's tough to argue education over that amount of money, because, it's like I said, if you're smart with that money, you can always pay for an education down the road if you need to. I think education is really important. I mean, but I think that's a different conversation. I think, like I said, if somebody's throwing me a couple $1 million and it's like go to college or take a couple $1 million and play a game I love, that's hard to turn down.
I know that's true. Anyway, thank you, Coach. Vince, back to you.
I think Sean did pretty well for himself in this later part of his career. He won a couple of titles with the Warriors. So I think he ended his career with a bang.
Yeah, that was great to see. And there was, the talk was when he injured that knee is he would never be back. So, he overcame a lot to get to that point.
Now, my question, Coach, is I don't know if we've probably seen him, and he's attending Gonzaga. I'm talking about Chet Holmgren. He's 7'1" and he can shoot from anywhere in the court and handle the ball like a guard. How do you defend against a guy like that?
Man, you hope that he oversleeps and doesn't set his alarm or something. I don't know. And that's, you start saying that, I know where you're going. Like, the game has evolved. Like when 15 years ago, if you were 7'1", you stayed within 5 feet of the rim on offense and defense. You just hung out there and you controlled the paint, and that was it. You see so many of those guys. I grew up a Chicago Bulls fan. So you got guys like Lowry Markkanen, who's 7 foot tall. Probably doesn't handle it as well as this kid does, but I mean, they're just all over the place. It's Kevin Durant is almost 7 feet tall. You forget about that because he doesn't play like a 7 foot. He plays like a guard. And if I was, the one thing I always want to find out with a big kid is can they pass the ball? So if we have a big kid, and generally at the high school level, they're still posting up, right? We get that just gigantic kid that's catching the ball in the low post. So we're running a double team or a triple team at that kid to find out if he can pass it. Because I always joke, and sometimes I put in the scouting report, he's a black hole. Like, the ball goes in, but it never comes out.
Yes.
And when they're like that, you can throw a second and third defender at him and get away with it. So if a kid like that can pass too, you're in trouble. Because if he spots that double team coming, he's 7 feet tall, he's just throwing right over the top, and he's picking up assists, and he's, is he making his teammates better or not? If he can make his teammates better by being a good passer on top of all that other stuff he talked about, good luck. Let me know if you guys figure it out, and I may have to borrow that strategy if you got one.
Because there's this other kid, coach. I saw he played for the under 19 national team, a U.S. national team under 19. His name is I'm probably you know him, Kenny Lofton or Ken Lofton. And
Yes.
he plays like Zach Randolph. He's a lefty. He's a bit on the heavy side, but he's very solid fundamentally, solid footwork. And you know, when you see him, you think this guy is, you know, no athleticism. He's slow-footed, but he's
Right.
pretty good. He's pretty good for his age.
That's funny. That's something we talk about like with our teams from time to time, because we'll give them a scouting report and they're like, we'll say this guy may not pass the eye test. Like he doesn't look like this world-class athlete or this really good player, but he's really skilled, you know. So that sounds like a kid who may not be the best athlete on the court, but a high level of skill will take you a long ways. I mean, you've seen so many. Larry Bird was one of those guys. Larry Bird wasn't a phenomenal athlete. I mean, he was pretty darn good, but he was just so skilled. And really, I think one thing that's super underrated is just having a high basketball IQ, just really understanding the game, seeing things before they happen, and you know, seeing what, kind of having an idea, predicting, knowing what's going to happen before it happens. That's something that's really hard to teach. So you get a kid like that. It sounds like this kid might be very similar to that, where he's just got a lot of skill and a high basketball IQ, and he just really, really gets it. And you know, those kids are fun to coach.
What is your coaching style, coach? Are you structured? Do you let your players free flow out there? Are you
Yeah, I think our
defensive
kids would probably,
oriented?
yeah, I think our kids would probably tell you we're pretty structured. But I mentioned earlier, like we like to play fast. First of all, we run kind of a what we call a hybrid zone press. It looks like a diamond press, 1-2-1-1 press. But the negative about that diamond press is, you know, if you're on the right side of the floor and you inbound it to the left side, it's really hard to run and chase that and trap it. So one of the things that the concept I came across that I really liked a few years back was we changed from a diamond to a 2-2-1 press in that situation. And we don't go trap that first pass. And instead we just try to look for traps kind of up the sidelines in that situation. I love the diamond press. I love the pressure you get. I love that early trap that you get. But when you go running and chasing to the weak side, by the time you get there, they probably already thrown over the top of you and they're gone. So we play that hybrid zone press. We try to play 10 guys if we can. If we're deep enough, we want to play 10 guys and just try to wear teams down. We want to play fast on offense. We want to get up and down the floor. Offensively, though, I think, you know, we tell our kids this: if you can run your break, you know, get the ball to the floor quickly and get it to the other side of the floor quickly and start breaking the defense down, I'll sit down and let you play. If you're not doing a good job of pushing the ball and or making those decisions where the ball's moving from side to side, then I'm going to step in and I'm going to start running sets and I'm going to start calling plays and I'm going to make sure we get that early ball movement. I mentioned I like quick hitters. Our sets take 7 to 12 seconds to run. They're not really long sets. And my hope is that flows into that more freestyle play that you said. I think sometimes kids just need a rhythm. Like you've got to give them a ball reversal, 2 screens, and maybe a ball screen, and then we just play. That's just kind of been my experience at the high school level. When I've tried, there's been years I've tried probably everything. I've tried like read and react stuff, just open motion stuff. And my frustration was always the early part of the offense. Like how do we kickstart it? How do we get it going? And that's kind of how I've settled into where my philosophy is. And, you know, in the book, I talk about that a lot in the book. Like these are things you need to consider as a coach when you build your philosophy. Like what's important to you. You know, if you're going to play a fast-paced game, can you live with more turnovers? If you're going to go nuts every time a kid turns the ball over, you probably don't want to play a fast style of basketball. So there's just a lot of things you have to think about. But I've said it several times. You can do it totally different than I do it, and we can both be really good. And that's why I love the game so much.
You know, coach, you seem to be calm and mellow. And I've read the early parts of your book, but you don't have to answer this. But have you ever been thrown out of a game? Have you ever been ejected?
I've never been ejected. I've gotten a few technical fouls, probably a lot more when I was younger. And I go back and forth on this. I think, you know, first of all, I think there's a lot of people in the stands that have sometimes a negative view of a certain coach. Maybe me, maybe somebody else. They show up on game night and they see us kind of talking to officials and sometimes we whine a little bit and all that stuff. And what they don't realize is we have this relationship with these kids and we're super close and we're going to defend these kids. And I've had kids come back and tell me, you know, I love that about you. I love that I knew I knew if something happened on a game night, you had our back. And I think that's what you have to understand. It's kind of like every kid on the floor is almost like your own son or daughter when you're coaching. And you have a little different emotional attachment to your team and your players. And so sometimes it's staged. Like sometimes I don't even know if I have a kid that's having a bad night, they're just really struggling and I'm trying to turn things around for them. You know, sometimes they'll get called for something and maybe it was the right call and I'll argue it just so the kid knows I'm on his side. And then, so I think there's a lot of psychology to it that maybe the average fan doesn't truly understand unless they've coached before.
Are there any coaches you follow, whether here or abroad? Any coaching style that you follow and that you're patterning yourself after?
I think, yeah, that's a great question. I think there's always new coaches come along that I'm intrigued by. For me, it started, you go back to like, again, we're really close. I'm in Illinois, we're really close to the University of Wisconsin. We're about an hour away. And Dick Bennett, his son, Tony Bennett, is the head coach at Virginia now. Tony won a national championship at Virginia in 2019. And Tony's doing a lot of things that his dad did at Wisconsin. His dad coached. His dad was a high school coach in Wisconsin, and then he moved up to a Division III coach, and then he moved up to Wisconsin Green Bay, and then he ended up at the University of Wisconsin, the Big Ten. So he really kind of paid his dues in the Wisconsin system. And I think as high school coaches, a lot of us coaches, you hear a lot about the pack line defense. The pack line defense is we're forcing everything to the middle, just kind of bottling it up. That was Dick Bennett. That's what Tony Bennett does at Virginia. That's what everybody's trying to copy at the college level. Before that, at the high school level, Dick Bennett ran what he called the push system. I think 90% of high schools do this, and maybe some younger coaches don't even realize that it was Dick Bennett, but they force everything to the outsides, and they try to kind of force you down the baseline and trap in that short corner area, 12 feet, from there to the deep corner, just really funneling everything to the outside and then not letting it come back out of there. So there's probably a ton of people that do that have no idea that Dick Bennett has influenced them. But then Dick Bennett evolved when he got to the Big Ten and went to the pack line defense. So defensively, he's been a big influence. Who else? And then Bo Ryan followed him at Wisconsin. Bo Ryan was phenomenal too. I think what I loved about Bo Ryan is just the way he, maybe not X's and O's because he ran the swing offense and I'm not really a pattern offense guy, but just the way he handled players, the way he trusted players, he built up belief in players. And then I think other guys today, I think it's always fun to listen to John Calipari, whether you either love or you hate Kentucky, I think, because they get the best athletes, so they're supposed to win. But I always like listening to his approach. Maybe, again, not another guy that really X's and O's wise, but just his approach to the game. And I always love hearing his sound bites after the game because I think he's very thoughtful in his reflections on game night. And so those are guys that I see. I like Chris Mack at Louisville now. He was at Xavier before and recruited one of our guys. So I kind of got to know him a little bit. And probably lastly, Porter Moser. I don't know how well, he coached at Loyola. He's coached Loyola in the Final Four. I'm an Illinois guy. They upset Illinois in the NCAA tournament this year. Porter Moser was a guy that recruited a couple of my kids back in 2004, 2005. And he was the head coach at Illinois State back then. Illinois State's it's a mid-major. It's a Missouri Valley school. And Illinois State fired him like the next year. And I remember telling my wife, like, God, this guy just got a great energy about him. I can't believe they let this guy go. Like if I was Illinois State, I would never let a guy like this go. And, he went on and now next thing, he's having this huge success at a Loyola at a smaller school. He's in the Final Four and just doing great things. And he just got the job at Oklahoma. So he finally hit the big time, but he's a guy that I've just had the opportunity to meet when I was a young coach and just really loved his energy.
You were talking about Loyola, what was it, Loyola Marymount or Loyola of Chicago?
Yeah,
that they went all the way to the
Loyola Chicago.
They got all the way to the Final Four and they were supported by an old lady.
Sister Jean, yeah.
Yes, my sister Jean, yeah. So
that was a great story.
That was well documented when they were winning game after game after game, upset after upset after upset.
Yeah, it was fun to watch, and it got to the point where you're kind of like, is this really an upset? This is just a really good basketball team, and I think I like the NCAA tournament more and more because there's more of those 10, 11 seeds that are good enough to play with the top 2, 3 seeds.
All right, Brian, your turn.
All right. Coach, I'm just curious, of all the players that you've been able to handle, were there any Asians by any chance?
Um, Boy, I had a few here and there. I've got a young man today, not I mean today, but this year whose family is from the Philippines. So, yeah, it's I had a foreign exchange student one year from Turkmenistan. That was interesting because he didn't speak a whole lot of English. He was still learning the language, and somehow he ended up in a foreign exchange program where he got over here. Great kid. Yeah, in our area, there just isn't a very high population in our area. I think in the States, probably the West Coast has a higher population there. So I just haven't had a lot of opportunities. And I think I don't know what the reason is for that. I think soccer is still number one with most. Depending on where you're talking, baseball is still obviously really big in that area. And we had a young man that was in our program too up until this year, and he's a really good baseball player. So he kind of, I think he's letting basketball go because he's a great baseball player, and he just wants to focus on that. But yeah, unfortunately, not as much as we probably should see. But again, I think that's reflected a little bit in the population where I coach at.
But Coach, have you, excuse me, have you heard anything about the players from the Philippines? I mean, the young players, especially the young players we have right now.
Like specifically individuals, I have not. I would love to hear about them. And that's not even. I'm not a guy who honestly has a lot of time to research and follow this stuff anymore. Just because the age my own kids are at, we stay pretty busy. It's our softball program that I also coach in for my daughter is year round. We took 3 weeks off when our season ended back in July, and we started practice again this week. So that's just me. I don't follow the NBA. Our kids know that. Like, I'm not a big NBA fan. If I have time to watch a game, I'm watching a college basketball game. I'm actually a really big baseball fan too. So this time of year for us, middle of Major League Baseball season, that gets a little bit of my time when I'm able to. But I don't know the scouting report on individual players. What I do know is the game is growing, and I think that's reflected in NBA rosters. You're seeing the diversity in these rosters, not just race and color, but just makeup of what country they're from, what their background is. I think you're seeing. I'm amazed how many times I'm watching an NBA game and I find out that so and so isn't from the States. Like, wait a minute, he's from where? He's from Germany, or he's from there. Like, there's just so many, and I think that's kind of for me right now. That's what's so cool about the game again, is that you guys are in the Philippines and I'm in the United States, and we're talking about this. I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, that's true. Well, anyway, Coach, let me shift. Earlier, you said something about virtual, this technology we're having right now. Now, a lot of us here in the Philippines were locked up at home. Would you say that the availability of things like this have helped you in your coaching and continued guidance of kids?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can learn so much. Just if you're going to be stuck at home, you might as well be stuck at home learning about basketball, right? Like what could be better than that? But again, I think the one thing I think the pandemic has done, I always try to find the silver lining, right? Like it's not fun being stuck at home, and you miss some of the freedoms you had before. But I think it's made us appreciate whatever it is that's important to us. For me, that's basketball and coaching and my family. It's really made me appreciate those things more. I think sometimes we live in this fast-paced world and we lose sight of things that we should appreciate more. And I'm hopeful that whenever this is all said and done, that we treat each other a little better. We appreciate the things that we love a lot more, and we come away with some lessons as a result of it. I think that's the hope and the goal. If we can find a way to be a little bit better. I remember when the pandemic first hit for us, the shutdown was March of 2020. And when it first hit, I remember saying, you've got all this extra time. I remember posting that on Facebook. You got all this extra time. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to be better as a result of it? You can sit there and talk about you're a victim of your circumstances, or you can make your circumstances make you a better person, whichever direction you want to take that. And my hope is that we've all we all appreciate things a lot more, and we're better because of it. I think that's how we react to it is all we control, right? We don't control that we're stuck there, so we control how we react to it.
All right. Okay, thank you, Coach. Vince, back to you.
Coach, how have you prepared your son for this coming season? Because he's going to hear whispers that he's
Yes.
on the team because your dad's the coach. How have you prepared him for all of that?
That's tough. I'm learning as I go. I've tried to talk to as many people as I know that have gone through what we're about to go through. And it's not the same to have coached like a youth team and coached your own kid. Like, this is a little different. He knows that even if he's the best player in the team, he's not. He knows that he's a role player. He plays hard. He's that kid that's taking charges. He's that kid that's diving on the floor. He's that kid that's leading some rebounds. On a lot of nights, he knows what his role is, but he also knows he's going to receive that unfair criticism. Anybody that's close to his talent level, people are just going to assume, well, my kid's better, but he's playing because he's a coach's kid. I don't know that I have a great answer for that, other than he knows it's going to happen. He knows that I'm going to coach him the right way. Like, if he stinks, he knows I'm going to sit him down. He knows I'm not going to start him unless he earns it. We've had that talk a lot. Like, I'm going to coach you. And I'll say this, probably too much the other direction, where it's almost unfair to him, where I'm harder on him because I want everybody to see it, that he's not getting any favoritism. And I read a quote. I don't know if you know Craig McDermott. He's been the head coach at Creighton University.
Yes.
He coached
Yes.
Doug McDermott, who's been a really good NBA shooter and played for quite a while. I found some quotes, and I actually put those in the book when I found them, because they're really good. And he's like, he said, I was harder on my kid, and I yelled at my kid more, and I didn't tell my kid good job as much as I told other kids. And he's like, none of it was fair. People's perception is going to be what it's going to be. And I'm probably not going to change that. He's probably not going to change that. So I'm going to continue to try to do a better job of coaching him the same way I would coach everybody else. Like, if he makes a great play, I think sometimes there's certain kids on your roster that you expect them to make great plays, and you don't get as excited about it anymore as you used to. Like, you just expect it from them. So, and I think that's a bad thing too. Like, they got to continue to know you appreciate that effort and just don't take it for granted. So, in his case, he's seen players on his team kind of push him away a little bit, and guys that he's growing up with. I think in his mind also, some of it is perceived. So, mentally, he has to kind of get over that himself and work through those things.
Is it the same thing with your daughter, who you're also coaching?
It is. It is. My daughter had a really, really difficult back injury this past season. So she ended up, she was 12 years old. She had spinal fusion surgery. She had a stress fracture in one of her vertebrae. So she had that done in late March, and she couldn't play softball until June. I think June 12th was the first game she was able to play in. So obviously she was behind. She just, the girls we were playing probably our 35th game, maybe even more than that by that time, but she had missed that many games. So, we sat her more. We kind of brought her back slowly. She was anxious. She wanted to get out there, kind of prove what she can do. But, the other girls had been playing well. And so we had to bring her back kind of slowly. And, again, it's just reminding them, hey, right now I'm your coach. When we leave the dugout, I'm your dad. When we leave the basketball court, I'm your dad. But I've got to be your coach when I'm here. So I'll tell you the same thing I tell everybody else. You got to be willing to take criticism. And sometimes that's pretty blunt when you're in a fast-paced game. You don't have time to sugarcoat it all the time. But also understand that I'm doing that with everybody else on your team as well. I'm trying to not treat you differently so that you have fewer of those situations where somebody's questioning why you're getting what you're getting. You just have to earn it like everybody else.
You have relationships with your former players, and you're probably still in communication with most of them. And when they call you and ask for advice, have any of them called you and asked for advice where, let's say, should I accept this offer? Do you know this coach? How is he like? Do you get those types of questions from your former kids?
Yeah, all the time, which is pretty cool, that they trust you at that level where they want, former, players, former assistant coaches, former team managers. All of that. The fact that they trust you enough to come back to you says a lot. And you know, I think I've had 6 players who have passed away over the years, you know, way too young. And so again, I mentioned, you know, big part of the motivation behind writing the book was getting people to understand the relationship side of it and valuing that more, just because you just never know. And so I really appreciate it. It's funny, I had a young man who just died from a motorcycle accident in the spring. And I hadn't talked to him in a long time. He was a kid that he was a role player. He didn't play a lot on a really good team, probably my best team I ever coached. And he thought he should have played more. And I knew he felt that way. But about a month before the motorcycle accident, he just randomly kind of reached out to me. And that's what I love about social media is you can find each other. And he said, Coach, he said, you know, I didn't always appreciate it. I said, but I get a lot of things now that you were trying to tell me when I was younger. He said, I really appreciate it. He goes, I don't think I ever said that to you. And it was awesome. It's always great to hear those things as a coach, you know, and I always say, like, some kids are going to get it right away. Some kids may not get it until they're a parent or they're a coach, maybe of a youth team or something. It just takes longer for some kids to get it. And when they do, you don't hear good job a lot as a coach. So whenever you hear it, you really appreciate it. And, you know, the fact that a year later he was in this tragic accident, or no, I'm sorry, a month later he was in this tragic accident, just kind of really hammers home how important. I had actually finished the book and turned it in and said, hey, I need to add something to it. And I wrote a paragraph about the kid and how he turned into a great parent, great father. He was always a good kid. He just didn't play a ton, and we didn't see eye to eye about that. But he was a great leader in life, which is invaluable. So,
Well, have you had a lot of former players who you mentioned you didn't see eye to eye, but former players you didn't see eye to eye with, but they still come back to you and call you and ask you about things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's we preach family a lot. You know, we're like a family, and you know, our family is our family. We don't get to choose our family, right? And sometimes we don't always like things they say or things they do, but ultimately they're a big part of who we are, and we love them, despite their imperfections. And so we preach that to our teams quite a bit. Like, we're just like a family. We're not always gonna see eye to eye. We're gonna argue from time to time, but ultimately, you know, what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room, that type of thing. We've got each other's backs, and you know, we're going to support each other at the same time.
Right, Coach, we have a few minutes left on the program. We're going to ask you to say your final words to our viewers and tell them something about your book.
The book is called The Journey, Lessons from the Hardwood. It's available for a digital download at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com and a bunch of other platforms. The hardcover print copy just became available. I just gave the green light on that. So it's new. And it's available at www.coachwinners.com. You can pre-order it there. It will be available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon probably within about 48 hours if you'd rather order it through them. So my hope is that there's a little something for everybody, that you know, not only the X's and O's side of coaching, but also understanding the relationship side and the emotions tied to it, and just what a great opportunity it is to have an impact on a young man or a young woman's life, and stay in that life, you know, with that relationship for a really long time.
All right, Coach. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy. School just started, and thank you for coming in.
Hey, Vincent, Brian, anytime. I really appreciate you guys. Man, you had some great questions. I appreciate the preparation and checking out the book and all those things. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Brian?
Thank you, Coach. It was very nice chatting with you. I could relate with you because I used to coach also. I picked up a lot of things from you.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. And if you ever need anything, just let me know. I'll tell you, any of your listeners, if they want to email me, they can email me at winnerscoach@gmail.com. It's winners with an S on the end, WINTERS coach@gmail.com. Always happy to answer some questions and help out coaches however I can.
All right.
All right, Coach. And you know, take care and stay safe.
Yeah, you too, guys. Thanks for everything.
Stay safe, Coach.
Yep.
All right.
Bye-bye.